Hello everyone, Dr. Polaris here. The late Cretaceous world was home to many members of the successful clade Aviolae, the lineage that today contains all modern birds in their staggering diversity. However, during the Maastrichtian stage before the asteroid impact 66 million years ago, the vast majority of living bird groups had yet to evolve, with avifaunas instead being dominated by the often toothed enantiornithines and basal ornithurines, which were often similar to waders or seabirds. Meanwhile, the modern birds within the clade Aves certainly did exist at this time, beginning their diversification roughly 70 million years ago according to recent phylogenetic studies, but were clearly rare animals, with only a few fossil remains having been found so far. The identity of these is often controversial, as many late Cretaceous avian fossils are very partial, consisting of singular scraps of bone. Only one genus, the Belgian Asteriornis, has been confidently placed within Aves, due to the completeness of its skull, which demonstrates beyond almost all doubt that this bird was an early relative of living ducks and chickens in Gallinaceae. This means that the other two major lineages in Aves, the Paleognaths, which contains the often large flightless birds such as ostriches and emus, as well as smaller forms like kiwis, and the Neo-Aves, which contains everything else, had also diverged during the Maastrichtian, although as yet we lack any physical remains of these. Indeed, the timing of avian evolution, like that of the similarly successful placental mammals, remains highly debated by paleontologists. Some studies have suggested that many familiar modern bird groups, such as owls, pigeons and shorebirds, had already originated before the KPG boundary, while many others have found that nearly all neo-avians evolved during the early Cenozoic, with their rapid diversification triggered by the sudden loss of competition from the now archaic extinct avians of the Cretaceous. After having researched the background information for this video, I tend to agree with the latter opinion, that the early ancestors of some bird groups did survive the KPG extinction event, but only in small numbers, with these forms probably being relatively terrestrial generalists, somewhat like Asteriornis. Only in the Paleocene would they diversify explosively, much as placental mammals would do, filling all kinds of ecological niches, including the role of aerial carnivores. Which brings us to the Accipitriformes, the lineage that contains the hawks, eagles, buzzards, Afro-Eurasian vultures, and secretary birds, among others. These animals are united by a suite of anatomical traits, including the possession of sharply hooked beaks, long broad wings, and strong taloned feet with opposable hindclaws. Almost all species are carnivorous to some extent, hunting a variety of prey types mostly during the day. Accipitriformes also display long lifespans and pronounced sexual dimorphism, with females often being significantly larger than males. Although highly diverse in appearance and lifestyle, not all predatory birds are members of Accipitriformes, with carnivory evolving among Neo-Aves multiple times. For example, the fast-flying falcons are more closely related to parrots and songbirds, while the cathartid American vultures form their own distinct sister group to the true raptors. Meanwhile, the owls of Strigiformes are also quite close relatives of the hawks and eagles, being among the oldest of all Cenozoic birds. The early evolution of Accipitriformes is not well understood, with their fossil record being quite poor. Phylogenetic studies indicate that they split from the cathartid vultures during the Paleocene roughly 62 million years ago, although the first fossils attributed to the group only appeared during the Eocene circa 50 million years ago. These were identified in Ypresian age deposits in what is now Belgium, although the remains were too fragmentary to be assigned to a particular genus or species. Modern Accipitriformes can be divided into three main families, which include the highly diverse Accipitrids, which contains the hawks, kites, eagles, harriers and vultures among others, the fish-eating ospreys of Pandionidae, and the terrestrial long-legged secretary birds of Sagittariidae. The latter two groups both have patchy fossil records, with the Sagittariids apparently being the most basal Accipitriformes, although the oldest known fossils are Middle Oligocene in age, dating to circa 29 million years ago. Unlike the modern secretary bird, which is endemic to sub-Saharan Africa and is specialised for a life spent out on the plains, equipped with highly elongated legs for kicking small prey, These were native to France, indicating that this family was more widespread in the past than it is today. 2 genera are known from this region, including the older Oligocene Amphisagittarius and the early Miocene Pelagopappus. There is not much information about these animals online, but their presence in mid-Cenozoic Europe indicates that they lived in humid subtropical forested environments, unlike their modern relative, which inhabits open savanna. The feet of both forms were also more similar to those of hawks and eagles, suggesting that prey was grabbed with taloned feet rather than stomped to death. This would have also made Pelagopappus better at perching in trees than living secretary birds, perhaps indicating that it also possessed comparatively shorter legs, more suited for living in forested ecosystems. It also doesn't help that the papers written on this genus are all in French, which I can't read. Why these European species died out is uncertain, leaving only the current secretary bird, Sagittarius serpentarius. This impressive and quite beautiful animal is instantly recognisable as a very large terrestrial bird with an eagle-like head and body on crane-like legs, standing up to 1.3 metres or 4 feet 3 inches tall. With grey, white and black plumage, including distinctive quill-like feathers on the back of the head, secretary birds spend much of their time on the ground, roaming the grasslands and savannas of the Sahel, eastern and southern Africa, looking for small prey. Adults often hunt in pairs, flushing prey from tall grass by stomping on the surrounding vegetation, with a variety of small animals taken, including rodents, lizards, snakes, frogs and other birds. Prey is often kicked to death, then swallowed whole through the bird's considerable gape. The species has a soaring style of flight, somewhat like that of storks, and is generally not gregarious aside from mated pairs and their young. Although they superficially resemble the Seriemas of South America, they are not closely related to them. Another group of Accipitriformes, composed of just a single family and genus, is Pandionidae, containing the ospreys. These are diurnal fish-eating birds of prey belonging to the genus Pandion, with a single species, P. Hallyitis, that possesses a cosmopolitan distribution, being found on all continents except Antarctica. These fairly large raptors have a wingspan of about 6 feet when fully grown, with a distinctive white and brown feathered coat, including a dark mask around the eyes. Unlike most other Accipitriformes, ospreys are specialised fish hunters, with seafood making up roughly 99% of their diets. They possess several adaptations for this niche, including reversible outer toes, sharp spicules on the underside of the toes, and closable nostrils to keep out water during dives. The plumage is also dense and oily, in order to avoid the feathers becoming waterlogged. Ospreys have a sense of vision that is well adapted to detecting underwater objects from the air. Prey is first sighted when the osprey is 10 to 40 metres above the water, after which the bird hovers momentarily and then plunges feet first into the river. Upon reaching maturity, these animals pair off for life. The modern genus Pandion first appeared during the Middle Miocene in North America, with fossils having been recovered from coastal California and Florida. The oldest members of the family Pandionidae are known from Oligocene deposits in Egypt and Germany, although these are too fragmentary to be assigned to a specific genus. This leaves the last and by far the most diverse family of Accipitriformes, the Accipitrids, containing up to 256 species that range from small insectivores to massive apex predators. These animals also have the longest fossil record of the clade, with the earliest forms appearing during the Eocene about 50 million years ago. Though, as is typical for the group, their remains are represented by only a few scraps of bone. All of the earliest accipitrid fossils are known from the northern hemisphere, suggesting that they may have evolved in Eurasia or North America, although this may reflect biases in sampling. One of the best preserved early members of the group was the genus Aviraptor from the early Oligocene of Poland, which is known from an almost complete specimen. Overall, this was a very small bird of prey, with long slender legs and body proportions very similar to modern hawks, the genus Accipiter. In life it would have been about as tall as a can of Coke, comparable to the smallest living hawks, such as the little sparrowhawk. The size and proportions of Aviraptor are most similar to those of species that hunt other birds. It was a contemporary of some of the earliest species of passerine and hummingbird, which may have been its prey, suggesting that the Oligocene diversification of accipitrids was a response to the radiation of small forest birds. By the end of the period, at least 25 million years ago, these birds had quickly achieved a near global range, with extinct forms being known from southern Australia by this time, such as the genus Archaehyrax. Slightly smaller and leaner than the modern wedge-tailed eagle, this was still a large forest-dwelling predator with grasping feet and long legs well adapted for grabbing decently sized prey. As the marsupial carnivores with which it shared its environment were generally dog-sized or smaller, Archaehyrax would have been a top-order predator, being an agile, if not especially fast flyer, with its comparatively short rounded wings, enabling it to weave in between trunks and tree branches. Another Australian form, the genus Pengana from the early Miocene forests of Queensland, possessed an unusual swivelling ankle joint, which allowed it to reach into tree hollows, similar to the modern African harrier hawk. Meanwhile, the Pliocene and Pleistocene saw an increased spread of open environments, triggering the diversification of the successful living Butioninae and Aquilinae, which produce some of the largest flying predatory birds of all time. It is important to state at this point that terms like hawk, eagle and buzzard when applied to accipitrids do not indicate close relationships, with the name eagle, for example, being used for many different big powerful raptors, though they're only distantly related to each other. Some of the most impressive extinct forms include Garganoaetus, two species of which were endemic to the former Italian island of Gargano during the Pliocene, now a peninsula connected to the mainland. The smaller of the two, G. murivorus, was hawk-sized, while the massive G. freudenthali was comparable to a golden eagle, with a potential wingspan of almost 8 feet. This species was among the apex predators of Gargano Island, feeding on the similarly endemic giant dormice, hamsters, pikers, and the small deer-like ruminant Hoplitomeryx. It was a member of Butioninae, being a close relative of living kites and buzzards. However, the most massive accipitrid to ever live was the famous Haast's eagle of Pleistocene and Holocene New Zealand, with a wingspan potentially up to 10 feet across in large adult females, and weighing at least 14 kilograms or 31 pounds. This was Aotearoa's apex predator, preying on a variety of endemic flightless birds, such as moas, adspills and Anseriformes. Indeed, it was capable of killing prey that weighed at least 200 kilograms or 440 pounds, with Maori oral histories indicating that the eagle may have occasionally attacked people as well. Despite its enormous size, this animal was most closely related to the Australian little eagle, which, as its name suggests, is rather diminutive, belonging to the genus Hyraeatus. This suggests that, like the similarly large island-dwelling Philippine eagle, this raptor evolved from much smaller ancestors that migrated to New Zealand and experienced a total lack of competition, thus rapidly expanding in size. Though it killed prey by plunging down from above, recent studies have shown that the beak was more comparable to those of condors in shape, meaning that the head may have been poked inside the body cavity of prey in order to feed on internal organs. As there were no competing large predators in its environment before the arrival of humans in the 13th century, the eagle would have fed in peace, with the moa carcass sustaining a single bird for many days. The species became extinct at the same time as its preferred prey, which died out due to hunting pressure, the introduction of the Polynesian rat, which consumed bird eggs, and habitat modification by humans, with the last individuals being present circa 1445 before slipping into extinction. Living accipitrids are incredibly diverse, with the internal classification of the family being quite uncertain until relatively recently, with an extensive 2024 study by Teresa Catanach et al., based in molecular phylogenetics, being very useful for this video, as it clarified the placement of several hard-to-place species. As there are over 260 species of these animals, I can't cover all of them in one video, so I'll be picking and choosing some of the more unusual or lesser known examples. In fact, this topic is so massive that I'll be splitting it into 2 videos, with part 2 coming out in a couple of weeks. The most basal accipitrids are members of Elaninae, which represent a subfamily of small, lightly built raptors with long pointed wings. These are represented by 3 genera and have a cosmopolitan range, all of which are hunters of small prey in relatively open environments, targeting insects such as crickets, as well as lizards and rodents. All 6 species are referred to as kites, and can often be seen hovering in mid-air while searching for their next meal. Beyond these lie an interesting isolate genus, Polyboroides, which is endemic to Africa and contains two species, the African harrier hawk and the Madagascar harrier hawk. These are medium to large-sized raptors, with the former species, P. typus, measuring up to 66 centimetres or 26 inches long. It possesses a mostly grey coat, with black feathers present along the edges of the wings and tail. Found across sub-Saharan Africa, this is one of the few omnivorous accipitrids, feeding on the fruits of the palm oil tree, as well as hunting a variety of small animals, particularly other birds. Interestingly, its long legs are double-jointed, being able to poke its feet into nest cavities in order to grab eggs and nestlings. It is a fairly close relative of the Gypaetan vultures, which contains 3 genera that are native to Africa and Eurasia. They are not closely related to the Egyptian vultures, which have a similar range, with this being an example of convergent evolution. Until the end of the Pleistocene, members of Gypaetudae were also native to North America as well, living alongside the famous teratorns. Living members include the impressive bearded vulture, which is present in mostly mountainous areas across a vast range that today encompasses much of the Middle East and Central Asia. Its wings are long and narrow, being well adapted for soaring and measure up to 9 feet 3 inches across, while it possesses a distinctly feathered head, unlike other vultures. This is mainly because the animal specialises on consuming bones rather than flesh, having a very powerful digestive system to facilitate this. The bearded vulture can swallow whole or bite through brittle bones up to the size of a lamb's femur, while larger bones are skillfully dropped from a great height, so that the smashed pieces can be easily consumed by the bird. They will also sometimes kill live animals as well, causing animals as large as ibex to fall to their deaths. Bearded vultures were once driven close to extinction in Europe, although numbers have recovered since the early 20th century. It is closely related to the Egyptian vulture, with its distinctive light plumage and orange-yellow featherless face. This species has a cast-iron stomach, being able to feed on almost anything, ranging from rotting flesh to human feces. They are also capable of tool use, utilising rocks to hammer open the eggs of ostriches and bustards. Meanwhile, the related and smaller palm nut vulture feeds mostly on fruit, with 60% of an adult's diet being made up of palm fruits, oranges and wild dates. These vultures are closely related to the subfamily Perninae, which are often referred to as honey buzzards, and are mostly restricted to warm climates, many species of which are specialised insect eaters. The Madagascar serpent eagle, however, is a forest-dwelling predator that targets lemurs, snakes and lizards up in the canopy. It once lived alongside the much larger Malagasy crowned eagle, which was one of the island's top predators, but became extinct in the 16th century due to the overhunting of its preferred lemur prey. Moving on, we come to a pair of sister families, the serpent eagles of Circatenae and the Egyptian vultures. The former are native to the warmer parts of Eurasia and Africa, dwelling in mostly forested environments, and often being specialised hunters of snakes and other reptiles, which gives the group their common name, the snake eagles. They have hooked beaks for tearing flesh from their prey, strong legs and powerful talons. They also have extremely keen eyesight, to enable them to spot potential prey from a distance in the visually cluttered canopy. While most of these birds feed on reptiles, there are 2 notable exceptions. One of these, the bataleur of Central and Southern Africa, is a generalist that feeds on carrion and a variety of small vertebrates. It is a rather odd-looking animal, with a large head for its body size, short stumpy legs and a small beak, which makes them somewhat resemble a vulture-eagle hybrid. Meanwhile, the Philippine eagle, one of the largest of all accipitrids, is a hunter of any arboreal animal that it can overpower. It was once thought to have a diet composed solely of primates, although more recent studies have found this raptor to be an opportunistic top-order carnivore, taking everything from civets, colugos to various domestic species. Like Haast's eagle mentioned earlier, this species evolved from smaller ancestors that found themselves in an insular environment that lacked other large predators, producing a huge eagle with a wingspan of over 7 feet and weighing up to 8 kilograms or 17 pounds. With a coat of white and brown feathers, equipped with a crown-like fan on its head, it is the apex predator of the Philippines, appropriately referred to by locals as the king bird. And that is where I'll be stopping this look at the evolution of Accipitriformes, with part 2 coming out in a couple of weeks' time, wherein we'll finish off the rest of the accipitrids. As you can see, this is a very diverse group of birds, with most being carnivorous active predators, although also includes frugivores, feces-eating scavengers and bone-eating soarers. Species can be found on all continents except Antarctica and in most conceivable ecosystems, from closed forests to open grassland. While their early evolution in the Eocene is quite mysterious, the group went on to incredible success during the Oligocene and Miocene. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you'd like to suggest your own ideas for future episodes, please feel free to support me on Patreon. See you again soon. Cheerio.